All right, Christjahn back, the agnostic atheist president of the ISU Association, along with Theodore and Jim. And oh yeah, the verse. Today, the existence of God. Who should decide whether God exists or not? It's live today on The View.
Welcome to The View from a Pew, a conversation among Christians who are out to grow their faith by asking the simple questions, the tough questions, and the stuff you really wish your pastor would talk about. Come on now, let's reason together. It's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so join the conversation. Call 244-0077. That's 244-0077. Now, here's your host, J. Michael McCoy.
All right, welcome. We are back. It's the 26th day of March, unless you're listening to this on a podcast and you're watching this on a delayed broadcast or a best of. We sure appreciate you being here. This is The View from a Pew on KTIA 99.3 The Truth and on webcast1live.com. We do this show every single day, Monday through Friday, 3 to 4. And as always, I thank you for listening. I love my job. I've had this job for 40-some years. I am so blessed to be able to spend my life doing something that I can enjoy. I can't imagine being, a lawyer and disliking myself and my identity and everything I do to people because I'm a nasty, mean lawyer. Oh, Theodore, I'm sorry. I forgot you were a lawyer.
Well, I'm here anyway.
Yes, you are. We appreciate it. You know what you get when you get 10 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean?
I heard once, but I forgot.
A good start.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I guess that's why I forgot.
Yeah, and remember, my mother is a lawyer, so I say all this with niceness in my voice.
I can see the niceness on your face.
Yeah, right. Okay, he knows me too well. And we have our good friend Christjahn here, and Jim is here. Jim was here yesterday and had, you're just a really good guest. I hope you know that. You really are.
It. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and Frank wouldn't let me have you back if you weren't
really?
good. Yeah, he'd put his hammer down and say, the verse says no.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, so he enjoyed it. You should have listened, Theodore. They talked about particular atonement.
Particular.
That's what he called it.
Well, that's what Jim called it.
Is that like subatomic? If you get into particles?
It's a particle atonement. And what that means is part of your body is atoned and the other party's not, so you have to work hard on the other part, and that you get in with works, and the other part you get in on grace.
Did I understand what you just said?
No, you shouldn't have. It didn't make any sense, so I can't imagine you would.
That's particular as opposed to limited.
Oh, I see. I got it.
We ought to ask Christjahn if he believed. Well, of course, you wouldn't believe in
atonement.
Particular atonement, would you? That would be kind of bad if you said, "Oh yeah, I know, God decides."
I'm still worried about the lawyer comment. I'm heading into law school.
Yeah, he's going.
That's right. You're going to law school.
I'm inching towards the door right now.
All right. Some of the top news stories we didn't plan on. No, that's okay. That's okay. We didn't plan on doing a whole news thing, but I don't know if you guys have heard that jet that went down in the Alps. It was murder.
Intentional.
It was intentional.
Oh, no.
The pilot got up to go to the bathroom or do whatever he did, and when he came back, the door was locked, and the co-pilot had shoved the stick or whatever it is down. There was no voices in the cockpit for the voice recorder to pick up, and they had him monitored, and he was alive until the plane hit the ground, but he did it on purpose.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, 3 Americans on board, 150 altogether. He has now I want to be real careful when I say this. He has a Islamic name, but at this hour they have made no connections to any Islamic group. So we don't want to rush to just assume that every time a plane goes down on purpose that it is a Islamic terrorist attack. Obviously, this was a terrorist attack. This man wanted to provide terror for all those 150 people, and he did till the moment they died. But nobody has taken credit for it, like the Taliban or the ISIS or anything like that.
Yeah.
Sad state of affairs. Sad state of affairs. All right. So, Theodore, we'll start with you. Who should decide? And by the way, Bruce, I'm going to let Christjahn talk more today. And it's really not up to me. It's up to the verse. So, Frank, make sure you let Christjahn talk more, because Bruce wants to hear more of Christjahn and less of me and you. All right, so Theodore, who should judge whether God exists or not?
Well, first of all, I think your listeners deserve to know that I am a non-practicing formerly board-certified litigator. And so I'm familiar with the process of people reaching conclusions based on evidence. And so when you get into the question of, is there a God, it's incumbent on someone to decide who should decide. Is it just the individual, which is clearly true with every individual on earth? But if we were to just step back and say, what kind of evidence would people be willing to accept and what would the burdens of proof be? There's a lot of analogy there to the judicial system that we have used in our country and many other countries use through the years. And so one should think about trying to say, what evidence would we require before a jury in the United States to prove that there is a God? And what would the burden of proof be? Should it be by preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely or not, or by clear and convincing evidence, beyond a reasonable doubt, or, and here's a phrase that's often used in the arena of atheism, and that is, do I know? Do I know? But obviously when you say beyond a reasonable doubt, if someone says I don't know because there's some doubt, then they have created a burden of proof which actually is never used in the courts and is virtually insurmountable. So what I would say is that when you're trying to decide whether there is a God, put yourself or look at what a jury would consider and what 12 people would decide based on a certain standard of proof. I think you can prove that God is there beyond a reasonable doubt.
Now, don't we first have to define what God is or who God is?
Yeah, and let me back up. Let's talk about just an intelligent creator. So someone who initiated what it is that all of us people here in this room today are experiencing. And so what I would say is that there are two kinds of proof that I think if I was the lawyer who was put before a jury of 12 people here in the United States, one of the first proofs that I would put on is, what do we see in nature and what does that indicate about whether or not there's a creator? And I think probably one of the most easily defensible proofs is what I say is cause and effect. If we look out around the world every day, we see cause and effect. Lightning comes down, it hits a tree, something falls to the ground. Rain comes down, creeks fill up. I wake up in the morning, I'm hungry. I go out and I ride my bicycle, Mac. The harder I pedal, the faster I go. So there's a cause. So instantly when you think about all of this that we have, you have to rush to this question, what was the first cause? Because we see cause and effect demonstrated throughout all of nature, in physics, and everything else. I think the other thing I would like to talk about is the consistency that we see in nature. And that is, I wake up in the morning, the sun comes up. The furniture hasn't floated to the ceiling because gravity shows up every day. The electrons that rotate around the subatomic parts of my body continue to rotate. And there's a whole world there that we don't even see that is very consistent and shows up every day. Consistency like that argues against a random event that just caused all of us and what we are to just come into existence. So cause and effect, and then consistency, would be the two main points that I would emphasize in starting to put on my case about God. Of course, there are a lot of other points I can bring up, but I think those are two things, and they're actually self-evident. And self-evidence is a form of proof, as witnessed by our Declaration of Independence. We say right in there, we hold these truths to be self-evident. So that is a Western form of evidence.
Christjahn?
So we've covered a lot of ground there right out of the chute.
I have to leave early.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I'm sorry.
No, not a problem. Where to start? So when you're talking about what the standard should be, I think generally I like to fall back on the Carl Sagan quote, which is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. When you're talking about something like the existence of God, that is necessarily going to involve a much higher standard of evidence than establishing whether or not somebody rode my bike without my permission. This is a much more important issue. It requires a very high standard. I think that's important. I think this is a dangerous enough topic when in the wrong hands that ethically we need to require a very high standard. Now, I'm not saying I'm not going to do what a lot of atheists do, which is essentially lay out a standard which is insurmountable. which would be just construct something semantically that is impossible to overcome as a method of trying to catch you and not being able to do it. I don't think that's fair. I think I see that too often. I see that in politics sometimes. It drives me crazy.
What's the real danger? What's your concern? You said danger.
There are a lot of people, just historically, religion in the wrong hands is a dangerous tool.
And hold on. I didn't hear anybody mention religion.
No.
I heard somebody mention intelligent creator. Mm-hmm. Don't go to religion yet, please.
Okay. Faith in general can be a dangerous thing in the wrong hands. I mean, religion aside, organized religion aside, faith can lead to dangerous things.
And can you define faith?
Sure. There's a lot of different. I think you can get as many different definitions for faith as there are people that you ask. Generally, what I like to, I'm fine with the Hebrews definition of faith, which is the evidence of things not seen, something like that. So it's what we use as a substitute for hard and fast evidence of something. It's the process, the proofs that we develop in our own mind to establish things that we can't see or prove.
Okay, so if Ted wakes up in the morning and he has faith that the furniture will not be floating on the ceiling because gravity works, that isn't faith, that's proof. I mean, the track record says that for how many ever years we can count, Ted's been alive 62, right?
That's right.
So for 62 years, which is 365 times 62, it has been 100% proven that the furniture is not going to float to the ceiling. That's not faith, that's proof.
That's called inductive reasoning. It's not an absolute. It's logical the same way if you're driving down the road and you pass 1,000 red houses and somebody asks you without you looking what color is the next house going to be, you're pretty safe in saying, well, it's probably going to be red. That's inductive reasoning. It's relying on our history, on what we know from the past, on our experiences from the past, but it's not deductive. It's not absolute. It's not something that you can absolutely prove.
With the five senses is what you're saying?
Yeah, or even philosophically.
Because you're talking about the scientific method, right? The inductive and deductive.
Yeah, there's components of that.
You're looking over the data, the facts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the deductive side is the logic, right?
Right.
To where you're trying to make sense of the facts, right?
I'd say they both involve logic. Deductive, I think if I were to rely too much on deductive reasoning, though, I would be doing that insurmountable thing, which I don't want to do.
But I'm encouraged that you do believe in the tool of logic for an argument.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a lot of what the argument today is for a universe that's self-created.
Mm-hmm.
Would you, like the Big Bang, would you go along with that theory of the origin of the universe?
Well, the Big Bang and many of the other theories don't necessarily implicate self-creation. That's not necessarily true. There are people that would make that claim, but it's not. One doesn't necessarily lead to the other.
Are you arguing for then the indeterminate principle then?
With a lot of these issues, I think it would be unfair of me to sit here and state what I personally think about it, because I am not a theoretical physicist. I am not a cosmologist.
Yeah.
I don't even play one on TV.
And no one here is or claims to be, but we're all in agreement that the origin of the universe had to be logical, right? In other words, what Ted was arguing for is that there has to be, if it's not God, you would call it a force to throw everything that we exist right now into existence.
Maybe. That's not something that we can say without a shadow of a doubt. What that argument is, and it's interesting, this is something that's espoused especially by William Lane Craig, who's a famous apologist who's around today. It's essentially what's called the Kalam cosmological argument.
Point of singularity?
Kind of. It's essentially the proposition that everything that exists had a cause, the universe exists, therefore the universe has a cause.
Christjahn is our guest, along with, Christjahn Beck is our guest, along with Jim and Theodore. The verse is here, and we're coming back with you live on The Truth.
from the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can give these grandkids back, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We can help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart. And it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
Welcome back. It is a great day on The View from a Pew. Reminder, C.S. Lewis's Screw Tapes, the Broadway play, will be at C.Y. Stevens Auditorium on April 14th. Tickets are now on sale. Call and get them. If you've ever read the book, you can only imagine how good the Broadway show is. But I will also tell you this is not a play for children, because you're going to have to explain a lot of stuff to your kid. Now, if you've got that kind of communication and relationship that your 12-year-old will say, now, I don't understand about this lust thing, Dad. What was this thing about the devil and lust? Yeah, that conversation. But for adults, Christians, non-believers alike, it's an incredible show. I hope you go see it. C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters at C.Y. Stevens Auditorium, April 14th. All right, Christjahn Beck, head of the Agnostic Atheist Student Organization at ISU. Theodore, who's a former attorney.
Yes.
Former workaholic.
Yes.
Yeah, and Jim, who is just a Bible stud.
No.
Well, you are.
A student.
Student, okay, studly student, is in with us today. And here's the conversation. Who should decide or judge whether an intelligent creator exists? Now, the reason we're not saying God is because God has a reflection into a religion. And we're not talking about religion today. We're talking about relationship and an intelligent creator who creates you. Now, go ahead, Jim.
I wonder for our audience, could Christjahn define again what your title is as far as an atheist agnostic, and then also why you lead a group on the campus of ISU. And I think we just need to have some definition of terms there.
Sure. I call myself an agnostic atheist, which is to say I do not believe that there is a God. That's the atheism side of it. Agnosticism, or Gnosticism, deals with knowledge. So by calling myself an agnostic atheist, I basically say that I will concede the fact that at this point I don't have the evidence to prove that there is no God. I'm not going to be able to prove a negative, but given that I don't believe there's sufficient evidence to establish that there is, the atheism side is that I will withhold my belief in the proposition that there is a God until such time as I'm given ample evidence.
Okay, but by definition, the atheist says no, and the agnostic says yes, but I can't really know who that is, right?
Agnostics, I generally, so there's kind of a colloquial understanding of atheism and agnosticism, which I talk to people about a lot. But agnosticism is a position of weak atheism. And I mean, when you get down to the strict semantics of it, because an agnostic essentially says, I don't know. Atheism is the position that I do not believe that there is a God. Not that I know there is no God, but that I do not believe there is a God. Somebody who claims to know there is no God would be a Gnostic atheist. Agnosticism, then, as such, is a qualified position of atheism, because if you stop short of saying there is a God, then by definition you don't believe that there is a God. Even if you think there might be, that's still a qualified position of saying, but I'm not sure. So that is still withholding belief. So agnosticism is a qualified position of atheism.
Has anyone almost said, you sound like a relativist, holding two poles of a contradiction, opposite poles of a contradiction, both to be true. In a sense, it sounds like you have to be one or the other.
Between atheist and agnostic, you mean? I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I see one of them as dealing with my knowledge and what I'm able to know. And that's kind of a loose sense of the word know, but I'm using it in a strict sense of what I'm able to prove or what I'm able to know beyond a shadow of a doubt.
So it doesn't sound like you're ready to be, if you were pushed in the corner and had to say, do you deny God, period, it doesn't sound like you're totally ready to go there. Because you'd just be an atheist then.
Not necessarily. That would be a Gnostic atheist. That would be somebody who says that I know that there is no God. I would not go that far. I would not claim to know that there is no God. I would call myself an atheist in that I do not believe there is a God, which is the definition.
That's very helpful here, because what I hear you saying, Christjahn, is that you say, I'm this because I don't know. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like the standard of proof that you're using is that you need to see it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And in our legal system, we use a less standard or an easier standard than beyond a shadow of a doubt. We say beyond a reasonable doubt. Mm-hmm. But to look at the statement you gave earlier about the person that says this is serious, we use beyond a reasonable doubt to determine whether or not people are going to get the death penalty. Mm-hmm. So that is a very, very serious standard. And so I would ask you if we can put on evidence to you beyond a reasonable doubt that there is an existence of a God. Would you be willing to consider that, or are you going to go to that higher standard and just say it's got to be beyond a shadow of your definition of what a shadow of doubt is?
Can I just say how much I love Theodore? Can I just say this right here?
Why?
All right, I'll be quiet.
What's
Go
lovable
ahead.
about me?
You're just lovable.
You lost your thought.
I would not. I don't necessarily think I would jump up to a higher standard in that context. Part of that is part of that's just out of, as part of this conversation, I don't want to move the goalposts on you. I don't want to say one thing and then have you give me what you see as an adequate explanation, and then if I feel trapped, say, "Oh, son of a gun, I better knock this up a notch, or I'm going to be in trouble." I don't want to do that. So I think I could easily say, for the sake of the conversation, that I think that if it could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, that I'd say that I would absolutely entertain the idea that I could be wrong. I try to keep myself open to that to the extent that any of us who are beholden and talking on the radio about something are capable of that. I mean, pride gets in the way at some point. Sure. I try to leave that as a possibility. So, but that said, many have tried.
I hear that.
I get this a lot.
Well, let me mention that in the garden, God told Adam and Eve not to eat of a certain tree, and he didn't say why. Mm-hmm. Didn't offer no explanation. He just said trust. So right off the bat, there's doubt that was given to man. Are you going to trust and obey or disobey? So God, I think beyond a reasonable doubt or even beyond a shadow of a doubt is an unreasonable standard. I think preponderance of the evidence, tip the scale in the balance of one side or the other, I think is the standard that ought to be used.
You know, the word reasonable doubt, though, interjects reason. And so what that does then is that lays itself before the public and what the public thinks is reasonable. And so I think that the evidence out there, and we can get to that another time, if laid out there and people were to consider it, they would say, after listening to all this evidence, I think it's been proven that there is a God beyond a reasonable doubt, because the other evidence that is trying to militate against a God just isn't reasonable, or it doesn't stack up much. It just isn't there. Whereas, on the other hand, we have this mountain of evidence that militates in favor of the existence.
So this is where it's going to get sticky, because there is a tremendous amount of philosophical and theological evidence, quote-unquote evidence, to discuss the existence of a God. Scientific evidence is an entire different bag of tricks. So that's something that we can talk about. We're probably not going to have time to get into all this today. But I think one thing that I would like to say, I know that we're relatively soon, we're coming up on another break. One thing that I just want to say real quick is that it's very difficult as an atheist to engage in some of this discussion about a creator or about a intelligent designer or a more deistic notion of God when I know that everybody in this room, aside from myself, ascribes to a Christian understanding of the creator of the universe. So it's much more difficult for me to, I don't want to say attack, I'm just on the spot and can't think of a better word. It's much more difficult for me to argue against a deistic or intelligent designer than it is to argue against a Christian God. And I think part of when I have these conversations with people, part of what inevitably leaves me feeling like I've been treated unfairly, which I never do in this studio, is that it seems like what I'm left doing is arguing against a creator or a designer, where if I can't mount a good case to knock that down, the default position is the Christian God, which is a different thing. Getting from a creator to Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and we're not going there.
Right.
I made that clear. Right. This is not about religion.
Absolutely.
I just want to start out by saying that we can, I believe there can be an argument made without a reasonable doubt that an intelligent creator exists. And I quite frankly think if we could take, if money was not an issue, and we could take all the, what are those called, depositions of people who have experienced an intelligent creator, I think it would be I think it would be impossible for a jury of 12 of our peers to say, yeah, I'm not sure. Because these people are all going to step up and say, here's my experience with an intelligent creator. I am an eyewitness to an intelligent creator.
But you can get a lot of eyewitnesses to say there's a Bigfoot.
No, you can't. No, you can't. I disagree with that, Frank. I
think Aristotle, not being a theist, would still argue. Obviously, he had a school of logic, right?
Absolutely.
And so he would. I mean, he believed in the unmoved mover, that something had to throw all this into action, right?
Yep.
Because Newton says what? What is at rest continues to stay at rest unless it is moved by an outside force, right?
Unless it is acted upon,
and acted upon by an outside force. So what I want to ask you is, if we can all imagine here, not considering Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God, let's just say absolute nothing, okay? Now, what could come out of absolutely nothing? And I would want to know your question. What answer to that question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we're imagining absolute nothing before creation or before anything existed. Absolute nothing. What could you possibly get out of absolutely nothing?
It's hard to say. This is a question that people have been asking for a long time. The unmoved mover or the prime mover, Augustine and Aquinas came back to this when they addressed some of the beliefs of Aristotle. It's a very interesting philosophical concept. I think, again, I don't know that I'm necessarily qualified to answer this question, but I can say that the vast, vast majority of people who study these things, cosmologists and physicists, theoretical physicists, are atheists. They're atheists.
Yeah, but I still want the answer to that question.
Absolutely. No,
I think everybody, and I think
and this goes back
any
to
level of intelligence will tell you that if you have absolutely nothing, nothing
can come
comes.
Of it. Well, that depends, because one of the things, there's work being done right now by Lawrence Krauss, who argues the exact opposite.
Well, but see, this is where, if we go beyond what I just stated there, we're getting into the sea of irrationality. This is where we're throwing logic out the window. And see, why we relate to logic as a human being created in the image of God, our minds know when we're up against the law of non-contradiction,
All right, we're going to take our next break, and Theodore has to leave us early today, so we're going to let him take the microphone next and try to get the case made here where there is an intelligent creator. Is that too much to ask for? We'll get to that. We'll come back next here live on The Truth.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Homs.
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed, fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're going to make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money-back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
if you sit in the back pew or the front pew. It's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
All right, 22 minutes before the top of the hour. Christjahn Beck, the head of the Agnostic Atheist Group at ISU, is with us. Jim, Theodore, the verse here. Ryan's producing. Let's throw it to Theodore because he's got to leave early to catch a plane.
Okay, thanks, Mac. Well, it's gratifying to me that we've had an opportunity to discuss about who should decide whether there is a God. And we've talked about the American jury system, 12 people, and the standard of proof that they use, and for very serious cases like death penalty. And that the standard they use is, can you prove that beyond a reasonable doubt? And so given that, that seems to be pretty close to the standard we might have for whether we know or believe or can conclude that there is a God, then two of the proofs I mentioned earlier that I wanted to have you all think about and have the audience think about is one, which is self-evident, and that is that nature in itself screams cause and effect. Nature tells us there has to be a cause for an effect. And so then you ask yourself this question, what was the first cause? And Jim, you so adroitly brought up, what if you have nothing? Can nothing cause something? And when you ask yourself that, you come to this realization there had to be something. And what I call that, I think the evidence screams for some kind of creator. I'm not calling it God right now, but I'm calling it some kind of intelligent creation that was that initiating mass, that initiating cause, that first thing. So that's one level of proof that I would put on before a jury. Mm-hmm. The second level of proof, as I would say, nature also screams consistency. Again, my furniture doesn't float to the ceiling in the morning. I get up, the sun comes up. All these things happen consistently. That nature of consistency in nature argues against that somehow in that void of nothingness that something created itself. It argues against it because consistency argues that it would stay nothingness for all time. There had to be something that went against what we see so evident in nature, and that is this consistency that we have. Think of how consistent it is on Earth, how we have just the right amount of oxygen, how we have just the right of sun, how we have the ranges of temperatures that allow us to live. And think of the consistency of the things we can't see molecularly, atomically, subatomically, and those things are consistently operating every day so that all of us in this room can be here. I don't want to get into the mathematics of that, but you could say mathematically, what are the odds of that consistency existing? And I would say that it is so far beyond the probability that happened randomly that again argues in favor of this intelligent creator or intelligent design. So those are my 2 points of evidence, and I think the jury would listen to that, and they'd say, Ted, we're listening to you because your burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. And I hope most of them are thinking, yeah, Ted, you're kind of getting there with me.
Well, I'm head of what's the head guy on the jury called?
Foreman.
I'm the jury foreman.
Yeah. Did you make a seconding speech to become jury foreman?
I think this has been rigged.
Yeah.
I did, and I just talked to the jury, and we voted 12-0 that you're right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought you'd want to know that.
That's a smart jury, by the way.
I thought so.
Yeah, they had a panel of 200 to get
to you 12. Are those jurors
12.
by chance named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Because I feel like this is rigged against me here.
Mary, Peter, Paul, Saul, they're all there. David.
It's a Judas who's a dissenting vote, but we won't get to that.
We hung him. We don't care about him.
So, it's an interesting case. It's an interesting case that you make. Essentially, you're making 2 points, which are relatively common apologetics arguments, which is one, the argument for creation or the Kalam cosmological argument, and then a second part, which is the argument for the fine-tuning of the universe or for the ridiculous improbability of life existing the way it is and the consistency of the universe being the way it is, if everything is random. I think that you might, if there was a jury of 12 Americans, I think you might be able to convince them. If they were the scientists in these respective fields, they would disagree. They would disagree because when you look at this on a level beyond the simple philosophical common sense understanding that all of us seem to intuit, it gets much more complex. Now, asking people to suspend their own sense of intuition is difficult because it immediately makes me sound like I'm trying to pull a fast one. But what we know about getting to some of these incredibly complex issues is that they are not intuitive. They are not in any way intuitive. And when you say something like, what's the probability that life would exist the way it does today? If the universe were any other way, it couldn't exist. Well, that may be true, but it's not taking into account the other sets, the other models, whereby other forms of life could exist, whereby it could have come into creation many other ways.
So Christjahn, let me just say this. In the jury system in Western culture, we would then allow your scientists to come in and testify before the jury. And you and I would be able to examine and cross-examine them as hard and fast as we can. And we can keep bringing on more and more witnesses. Eventually, the trial will end. I will have put on my witnesses, you will have put on your witnesses. And what I told you earlier was, I think even though you have put on, and the system would allow you to put every single one of your scientists on there, I think the jury's still going to go 12-0 beyond a reasonable doubt in favor of an intelligent creator.
Don't you think if that were true, that this would by now have been decided?
Well, I think it has.
It actually is individually decided by people who make this decision in their lives, and they look out and they look at the evidence and they make the decision.
I think Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, being on both sides of the fence, would still argue that that something cannot come out of nothing. It's as simple as that,
But it's not. That's the problem, is that it's not that simple. It gets into something much more complex that I am simply not qualified to address. I mean, this is the problem, is that seems so intuitive, that something cannot come from nothing, and that may be true. That absolutely may be true. I can't say one way or another with any form of certainty whether that is true, but the scientists that are working on this, the vast majority of them are atheistic in their belief about creation.
But you have a Christian Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas, a mental giant, academic, very great intelligent person, and then you have Aristotle. But they're both saying, if you're going to be logical, and you said that on the early part of the program, that you respect logic, it demands the creator or first cause.
Intelligent design.
It demands something to spark creation. It does not necessitate that be a divine being or an intelligent.
Well, I'm just saying, if you call it a force, even
there's certainly something. I mean, if there was at some point nothing, then something certainly sparked something.
Okay, so if you have that little compressed matter and energy, point of singularity, right? And then one Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, explodes, right? What caused the explosion? People like Darwin, they'll talk about the tree of life and that everything came from the same cell, and we're all just a grown-up germ. But he cannot tell you what struck the match.
No, absolutely.
What started it all?
Abiogenesis is what started life is not something that we know the answer to.
To me, we always have to go back to that tool of doing science, and that's logic, or else we're in the sea of irrationality.
All right, and here would be my question. We've got another break coming up, and we got a bid adieu to our friend Theodore because he's got to catch a plane to Texas. And don't take offense by this, but if you're not qualified to make that decision of whether something came from nothing or nothing could come from nothing, then you're not qualified to be an agnostic.
How do you mean?
Well, you're not qualified to say there isn't an intelligent creator because you can't prove that there isn't.
Because you're making an absolute statement.
But that's not the standard that we go by. I mean,
But who goes by?
Humans. I mean, just as
the
way that we live our life.
If I call you in to testify in a jury and you admit I'm not qualified to be here, you're out the door.
But if what you're asking is that because I can't establish absolute certainty about this, that I'm not qualified to say either way, I would say that even scientists at that point aren't qualified to speak to their own areas of expertise.
I would agree. That's why people of faith can tell you that there is a God. Okay, we're coming back right away.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can return the grandkids, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We'll help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart. And it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
All right, 10 minutes before the top of the hour, Salem Radio Network News at the top, and Michael Mudloff in True Blue. We've got Christjahn Beck here, who's the head of the Agnostic Atheist group on ISU campus. Jim is here. Theodore had to take off, and the verse has been so quiet. I'm so proud of you. You know, you haven't even thrown anything at me
That's
yet.
Right. That's right.
But you have a couple questions, and I want to give you some floor time.
Well, just a couple of questions. Do you think there's any options besides the universe always existed or it had a beginning?
Probably not.
Well, then Stephen Hawking has conceded in a 1988 book that I was talking to you about that if the universe has a beginning, then he could concede it might have a creator. Would you agree with Stephen Hawking, or would you?
Well, for one thing, Stephen Hawking is an atheist. Yeah, Stephen Hawking is an atheist. When people like Hawking or Einstein talk about a creator, they're not talking about a divine, intelligent being.
Right.
They're talking about
Einstein might be.
They're talking about some kind of any number of things, but what they're talking about is they can conceive of something that might have been the original spark. So, I mean, there's options. There's the multiverse thing. There's all kinds of stuff. But I would agree with him that the universe could possibly have had a something that sparked its creation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was an intelligent being.
Well, then my second question would be, how do you account for energy? You put a steaming hot cup of coffee on this table. That's energy. Mm-hmm. That cup sits there by default. It cools off, and it's no longer energy anymore. How does this planet keep replenishing energy? How does the flowers keep growing? How does people keep having babies? How does the world regenerate itself without something that is got care over it, somebody who's watching over and caring for the place, because energy by definition eventually burns out?
You're talking about the second law of thermodynamics, and what you're talking about is essentially that if the Earth has a finite amount of energy, that over time it should exhaust that supply. But that's only true if the Earth is a closed system, which it's not. The Earth is an open system that receives energy from the sun, among other things. So there is a constant renewing source of energy to the planet.
But then you agree that the sun, we're dependent on the sun, and
yes.
So the theory would be the sun's eventually going to burn out, right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, the sun will eventually burn out. But at this point, the energy that the Earth absorbed, the things that you were saying are only true, like I said, are only true in a closed system. In an open system, which the Earth is, the way the Earth works is in perfect accordance with the second law of thermodynamics.
You're way over my head. I'm sorry. I just know Jesus exists. I don't know anything about heat.
Jesus loves me.
Or thermo.
That's all you need to
know. The Bible tells me so.
Christjahn, he's at ISU. He's obviously a good student, reads a lot of books. I'm happy to hear you read a lot of the Bible, too. Mm-hmm. And you were brought up in the church. Your dad's a pastor. Mm-hmm. And so you've been around it a long time. My other scholastic question for you would be is, if you are absolutely convinced that there is no God, or saying at least you're...
That I don't believe there is a God.
That you do not believe that there is a God. Why aren't you down in Florida on the beach somewhere having a good time? I mean, really, why would you be here talking about, the Bible, or would you be talking about the existence of God or the beginning of the universe?
There's a lot of answers to that question. That's one of the questions that I get asked very often. I think part of it is
if you don't believe in God, why would you also, not only participate in a group like, I don't know how many members you have on ISU campus, but to actually lead a group of atheists up there on campus? I am assuming you're trying to grow and get more members.
I think he's saying live fast and leave a good-looking corpse.
So one of the things that I found through my path to atheism is that it's a lot more common than people think, especially these days. But a lot of times when people leave their faith, they feel very ostracized and they feel very shut out. So providing a group and providing a social network and providing a system of support for people who are going through this is important. There's that very practical side to it. Then there's also that as somebody who's always cared about these things, Mac will tell you that I like to argue, which is true. I'm a political science major going into law. Of course, I like to argue. But I care about the way the world works. I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as I possibly can. And I think we still live in a society where religion has a huge influence. And
for good.
Some of the time, not all the time. I would argue that there are certainly cases. There's a petition right now in California that a Christian put together that to kill people for sodomy, which is not.
And the Bible, and that's not in the Bible. Yeah.
Well, that we can talk about on another show, but because some of that is in the Bible. But I know that Christians these days aren't that way as a general rule. My parents certainly aren't. When I told my parents I was an atheist, nobody hit me over the head with the rock. Or maybe they did. That would explain a lot. Maybe I just don't remember it.
But you have an axe to grind, it sounds like.
I'm sure at some level that's true. I'm sure that I'm not aware of it, but I'm sure that there's probably some underlying resentment about something, but I'm not consciously aware of it. But I'm sure. I'm human. I'm sure I'd be subject to that at some level.
And you understand too from reading the Bible that you cannot come to understand the Bible without a spiritual awakening, right?
Yeah,
you can understand it reading words on a page, but for it to really affect your life.
But understand that at one point I did believe that. At one point I believed in the Bible. I believed that I was reading it in the Word and the Spirit. I believed all those things. And it was through the process of doing that and trying to strengthen my faith, that I got to a point where I said, I can't subscribe to this anymore. This isn't a moral code that I can subscribe to.
Would it be fair to say that you're too earthly minded to be any heavenly good?
It's a good catchphrase to put on Facebook, so I'm happy to go with that. I'm too earthly minded to be any heavenly good.
Because here's what I focus on.
Yeah,
I want to make sure I'm not so heavenly minded that I'm no earthly good.
Mm-hmm.
I got to be real careful because that makes me arrogant and just to shove people like you say, well, you're just wrong.
I wouldn't see being too earthly minded as being a problem myself. I mean, to me, I say that's what I've got access
and
to.
And you are an agnostic. Very good. You just proved it in that statement.
Ding, 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 ding.
All right, we look forward to having you back, Christjahn. And the hour goes by too quick. We'll see you tomorrow. And until then, just figure out somebody you need to forgive. There's somebody in your life. I know every time I say this, you think of somebody, but then you push it out of your mind. Well, tonight, today, now, forgive them. And that's how you'll be forgiven.